Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Welcome back to the channel, and hello if you are new. I hope you've all had a good weekend and you're enjoying the wonderful world of YouTube. There does appear to be some fun and games going on at the moment, some shenanigans. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but apparently, very briefly, there are people who are making comments that imitate this channel and other odd things. Nothing we haven't all seen a million times before on the internet. Trolling 101 basically, but obviously you can verify if a comment is coming from the source it claims to be coming from just by clicking on it. Anyway, I thought since we're all depressed and upended by the current global goings on, that we might need a little bit of cheer to be brought into our lives. So I thought I'd tell you this story about a man who threw his heavily pregnant wife off a cliff to her death. Now, to be fair to this guy, Turkish national Hakan Aysal, he's not been convicted, so we do need to remember that he may not be guilty, of course, but the Turkish authorities, for what that's worth, have charged him with murder over an incident that took place in June 2018, which resulted in his wife, Semra Aysal, dying. Now, men wiping out their pregnant wives and kids is unfortunately not an unheard of phenomenon, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was a murder, and pushing someone off a cliff seems like a pretty good way to get away with murder. I mean, yes, there are going to be some questions asked of the remaining person, but there will be very little forensic evidence proving that a murder took place. The police will pretty much be working with circumstantial evidence only, and witnesses if there are any. Which means if you do murder someone by pushing them off a cliff, it's probably best to hold off for at least a few months on cashing in on their life insurance policy afterwards. Unlike our smiling boy Hakan here, who not only took out a life insurance policy on his wife for the equivalent of £40,000 just before they went on their romantic clifftop adventure, he tried to cash it in immediately after her death. I don't know how quickly afterwards, but the word used is immediately, so I suggest that that means he went straight to the insurance brokers after she died. Obviously, the payout was withheld because the insurers found out that he was being investigated for pushing her off the cliff, because that's apparently not allowed when it comes to life insurance. And the police have now charged him with murder as well because it looked so suspicious. Now, the police thought that aside from the attempted cashing in of the insurance policy immediately after she died, it was also suspicious that they spent 3 hours at the top of the cliff before she died. The cliff is a popular beauty spot, and the police suggest that they were up there for 3 hours because Hakan was ensuring that there were absolutely no possible witnesses around before he pushed her. Another thing which apparently gave the game away, certainly in the eyes of Semra's family, was the fact that after the death Hakan displayed no sadness whatsoever. The family were all together crying and grieving, and Hakan didn't appear to be sad at all, which could be seen as a slight red flag. Arguably though, the most messed up thing about this case is the fact that Hakan took smiling selfies of him and Semra at the top of the cliff before she fell. So if he did indeed kill her, he took these photographs with her, knowing full well that he was intending to kill her, which is completely ghoulish, obviously suggests an absolute absence of empathy in the slightest. Not only that, possibly an abundance of hatred for his wife, to be able to actually smile with her, and it suggests that she didn't know that anything was coming. It may have been that he didn't give her any signs at all that he was planning this, because she's also in the photos smiling and completely oblivious to the fate that awaits her, which is tragic and very disturbing. Whether the photos were taken as souvenirs or whether they were taken just to look normal, it still is sickening if you are taking photographs with somebody smiling to the camera together and knowing full well that you are going to kill them afterwards. And taking photographs with murder victims, especially now with camera phones, it's a sign of the times, and it shows how broken our culture is, to me anyway, because more and more we're seeing people who commit murder who take photographs with their victims before, during or after the murder, and quite often they end up posting these images to social media, which is another topic of conversation altogether. But it all suggests that society is going down the drain. Of course, it might only look like that. It's quite possible that is not true and that is just an illusion, and that society has always been this sick, or at least certain elements of society have always been this sick. So the police have now investigated the guy and they have finally charged him, so they must have been investigating for a long time and decided that they have got this evidence together. I suggest that they are probably correct with what they are saying here. However, again, he hasn't been convicted yet, but he has lost his £40,000 payout, and he's probably going to go to prison for life, which in Turkey means a minimum of 24 years, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I know I don't need to ask you to do that because you always do, but the Turkish legal system is quite similar to the UK system, really, in that if convicted and sentenced to life for this kind of murder, he is almost certainly going to get out one day. 24 years is the minimum term, but after that he's likely to be released. But even so, putting empathy aside for Semra here, because I do find it very sad what has happened, especially if this is a murder, but just for the sake of discussion, I can't see how £40,000 was worth the risk of spending a minimum of 24 years inside. I could understand a person being so driven by greed that they would take their chances with a insurance murder for maybe a couple of £1,000,000. I wouldn't endorse it. I wouldn't go around advising people to kill for a couple of £1,000,000, but for £40,000, that's almost an added insult to the wife. It works out being around about 4 years of the average wage in Turkey, so it's not like you could have gone and lived like a king for more than a weekend. But it does suggest that if this was a murder, money wasn't the main motivation. It was probably just an added benefit that he tried to tie into it, which ended up being a big part of his downfall. There's a common misconception that psychopaths have got high IQs, but they are just as likely to be as dumb as the rest of us, and this guy may be an example of one that is dumber than the rest of us. You do get quite a lot of very stupid psychopaths. Look at Chris Watts, for example. Pretty smart when it came to blueprints of machines and things like that, but a very, very stupid man, possibly one of the dumbest killers ever known. And this guy may well be another example of that, immediately going and cashing out the life insurance policy after she dies. There's no other word for that than stupid. Saying that, the guy might be innocent, and he might even be a psychopath, but he might be an innocent psychopath. This might just be a case of a guy who's about to be sent down because he didn't express the correct emotions outwardly after a fatal accident, which made the family suspicious, obviously. And clearly it's normal to want to blame somebody after the sudden death of a loved one like this, especially if the last person to see them alive doesn't seem to care that they died. That's going to annoy you as a family, but it doesn't mean that the person who doesn't care that your family member died was involved in their death. And obviously an insurance company is going to halt a payout the first opportunity they get, so the fact that they stop the payout doesn't mean anything at all as to whether he's guilty or not. So maybe it's a gross miscarriage of justice in the making, who knows. We'll need to wait and see if he gets found guilty or not, and if they release more details at that point. It would be interesting to see what evidence in full that the police are going on when it comes to this. I'd imagine a case like this is going to be extremely difficult to prosecute, and it's one of these things where it's going to come down to the quality of the defence lawyer if the evidence is all circumstantial. So anyway folks, I think I will leave that video there. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about this horrible situation. Please drop a like if you did, and of course let me know your thoughts in the comments regarding this. Thanks again for tuning in folks, I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.